Okay. So welcome everyone. It's great to see you. I'm Rabbi Devorah Lynn, if we haven't met before, and I'll be facilitating, I'm a co-chair of Jewish Earth Alliance, and I'll be facilitating tonight's meeting and all of these monthly network meetings. And it's really inspiring to see you all from all over the country. And I want to begin. We always start with a kind of invocation, and this evening it's a pleasure to have Tamar Moss, who was recently awarded the Jacob B. Goldston Family Award for Environmental Excellence and Activism from Brandeis University. You just graduated this year, is that right? And in high school, she was involved with Bloomington's interfaith community of environmental youth. And later she organized the Brandeis Climate Justice Group. She feels that climate change and distributive justice are the most important issues of our time. And she now interns with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Where's that located, Tamar?
That's in Golden, Colorado.
Golden, Colorado, nice. All right, well, let me turn this over to you for some words of inspiration from the Torah.
Thanks, Aurora. In the Torah, our ancestors wandered through the desert, condemned from entering the land of Israel due to their past wrongdoings. The Torah refers to these people as Dor Hamidbar, or the generation of the desert. Throughout the Torah, there are other Dorot, or generations, that are talked about in a similar negative light. The generation that was destroyed by the great flood in the story of Noah's Ark was called Dor HaMabul, and Dor HaMiflagah was the name given to the generation of disunity of the people who created the Tower of Babel. Just like these past generations, I feel that we too are at risk of being known by one of these not so flattering Dor names. Based on our current trajectory, we could be known as Dor HaEsh, or the generation of fire or climate change. Along with these rampant wildfires that are blazing across the globe right now, we have the disunity, the floods, and the wilderness-like future of endless punishment of all three of these past Dorot combined. I think it's very important that we change our ways so that we do not become remembered by future generations as Dor HaEsh, or the ones that caused this mess. But it's not just the fear of being perceived by the future generations as the ones who messed up that motivates me to take action. It's the fact that climate change is already happening and it's already affecting those who are already marginalized. In this week's Torah portion, Kitetse, it says, "Parents shall not be put to death for children, nor children be put to death for their parents." This is the idea that we should only be accountable for our own wrongdoings and not be punished for those of others. With climate change, the carbon emitted by previous generations is punishing this world now, and the emissions of our generation will punish the children of the future. Based on what I just read from Kitetse, we should not be doing this. We shouldn't be punishing the children of the future for our actions that we are taking now. And sometimes it feels like my generation was already cursed in inheriting this world filled with carbon and pollution left from the Dorot before us. But I think that my generation is different from the other Dorot, from Dor Hamidbar, in that we're not prescribed to live out our lives in this punishment. It doesn't have to be this way, because we know that we can fix climate change. And at this point, we've done a lot of research. We've created the technology. We know about the individual actions that we can all take together to reduce the problem. And we know about multiple pathways that we can take to reach net zero carbon emissions. In this week's Torah portion, there's also a discussion about what to do if you see that your neighbor's livestock has gone astray. It reads, "If you see your fellow's ox or sheep has gone astray, do not ignore it. You must take it back to your fellow." A couple verses later, it says, "So too shall you do with anything that your fellow loses and you find. You must not remain indifferent." I understand this passage as a moral obligation to fix the problems that we see are harming others. And I think that this should extend to climate change and environmental care as well. Though the harm and losses caused by climate change might not be as tangible to us as losing an ox, I think we are still obligated to help mend what is lost. If we see that our fellow human beings are being afflicted, the Torah tells us we should not remain indifferent. At this point, we have the tools to fix climate change, and I see it as a moral obligation to my door and to the Doro after mine that we use these tools. Because at this point, it's not about if we can curb climate change, is will we, and do we have what it takes to do it? So I feel that as Jews and as people on this earth, we do have the moral obligation to do so, and the Torah tells us that we must. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that admonition. We do all have we may not all be guilty, but we have the responsibility as, was that Abraham Joshua Heschel? I think so. Thank you so much, Tamar, and keep up the good work, and keep the faith in doing that work, even when it seems very challenging. It's the most challenging thing I think any of us have lived with in our lives. So I want to say it's just so good to get together with friends and fellow activists in a week when the news was pretty distressing, so that we can support each other. So tonight we're going to take action together after our speaker and write our letters for this month, if you can stay with us. If you've already written letters, that's great. But you can amplify your impact by texting your friends, by emailing or texting others and inviting them to participate with us. So we'll do that at the end of the meeting, 15 minutes after the hour. And Mirala at the end has some special photos that she wants to share with her in her action this week. So so who's in the house tonight? Let's see. It seems like we've got people all across America. We've got the West Coast, right? Wave to us, West Coast. California. Anybody from Washington or Oregon? We got Northern and Southern California. Now we don't have our Oregon people. And anybody from the mountain states? All right, you're in Golden now. That's great. That's great. And what is this? The Jewish Collaborative of OC, Ocean City, is that? And we have people from the Midwest. We got Indiana and Illinois, did you say? Yeah. And let's see, anybody else from the Midwest? And how about the East? We know we have our East Coast people. Virginia, where are you from?
New York City.
New York City. Oh, Elliot's from New York, right? Yeah. What part of New York, Virginia?
Lower East Side of Manhattan.
Ah, Lower East Side. Wow. Orchard Street.
FDR Drive.
FDR Drive. And Elliot, you're in Brooklyn?
The Bronx.
The Bronx. The Bronx. Okay. And and Ziv. Ziv is in New York, right? Our intern. So welcome, Ziv. Yes, right. Hands up. We welcome Rabbi Marcia Tilchin from OC, Ocean City? No. Where are you from?
Orange County.
Oh, Orange County. Okay, West Coast again. Okay. So it's great to see everybody, and we've got representatives from all across the country. That's fantastic. So I want you all to stay tuned for what's going on this month, because the month of Elul is a busy month to prepare for the high holidays. And there's several things going on now. There's Diane, in particular, Diana's call to action. And there's a webinar tomorrow from COJL, the Coalition on Environment and Jewish Life. And And then in September, there's more going on. There's going to be things going on over Sukkot that we're working on, and we'll keep you posted and all that. And then Mirala is advertising September 30th is a program on line 3 of the pipeline in Minnesota, the action on that with Indigenous citizens up there. So I'm delighted tonight to invite Antonia Herzog to speak to us this evening. She has 4 degrees in physics, which is certainly impressive. And rightly so, I should call her Dr. Herzog. And she's worked in the Senate and at the Physicians for Social Responsibility on Climate and Energy, the Natural Resources Defense Council on Climate and Air Quality, and is now the Associate Director of Partnerships, Advocacy, and Equity for Climate and Health.
Recording in progress.
Whoops. At Healthcare for Healthcare Without Harm. Her team leads the development and implementation of federal policy advocacy strategy that promotes legislative and regulatory climate solutions to support the transition to a climate smart and climate ready healthcare system. From your lips to God's ears, climate smart and climate ready healthcare system. And Antonia, I think this is a perfect month to talk about healthcare strategies with you. So let me turn the video over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for
You're
inviting me to join you today, this group. It sounds like you're doing amazing work. And way back in the day, I remember working with Kojo on climate legislation. So they're a good group. So let me share my screen. Let's see, where are we? Hopefully that will work. Okay, and I'm now, let me just get that into presentation mode. Okay, so I'm going to assume that folks don't necessarily know what Healthcare Without Harm is, so that's where I'll start. We are a international, actually, nonprofit, though I focus on U.S. federal advocacy work. We were founded in 1996, and we work to help the healthcare sector address its environmental footprint and become anchors in their community, as well as advocates for environmental health and justice. And it all started, the first campaign was focused on the elimination of mercury and medical waste incinerators. It started in one Boston hospital back in '96 and has scaled up now to a global collaboration with the World Health Organization. So, and the world's governments signed the Minamata Convention on Mercury in 2013. So that was the big success of that initial campaign, committing to that global phase out of mercury in medical devices by 2020. Right now, we work with hospitals, as I said, around the country, around the world, but also around the US to reduce their carbon footprint. So I'm in the climate and health program. There's other programs in food and chemicals. As well. And so we're working on the climate angle and getting the healthcare sector to aggregate its power that it has to advocate for clean energy and climate smart policies, and to accelerate that transition that we so desperately need to the low carbon economy that protects health and promotes equity. We believe that the healthcare sector has a unique responsibility to act. Healthcare is the only sector with a healing mission and has committed to do no harm, and yet its operations contribute significantly to climate change, and as a result, the very diseases that they're treating. The healthcare sector, greenhouse gas emissions make up 8.5% of US total emissions, and hospitals are about a third of that. If it were its own country, the US healthcare sector would rank 13th in the world. So we represent the healthcare sector 18% of US GDP. So it has an outsized impact, as I'm sure you're all aware, on our economy. And it can use that impact to drive this transition to a low carbon supply chain as well as clean energy. We also, just so you're aware, have a sister organization, it's a membership organization called Practice Green Health, which has a network of 1,200 hospitals, basically about 20% of US hospitals around the country. So that's healthcare without harm. Now, and folks might have seen this as a sort of a well-known slide. I'm not sure how familiar people are with this, but climate change impacts our health in so many ways. And this is a great slide from the CDC, which sort of explains those connections. Rising temperatures, extreme weather, rising sea levels, and just increasing CO2 causes air pollution, an increase in vector-borne diseases, increase in allergens, impacts our water quality, environmental degradation, and all that has, and all those impacts then that influence our society and our health. So asthma, cardiovascular disease, respiratory diseases, malnutrition, heat-related diseases, and also ultimately forced migration, civil conflict, and we're learning more and more about the mental health impacts as well. So climate is all about our health. And who's the most impacted? I'm sure you all know this as well as anyone, but these health impacts that I was just telling you about are not felt equally. Vulnerable populations with the least resources to respond, both in the US and around the world, are the ones that feel the brunt of climate change the most. People of color, the elderly, the poor, children, they are the ones that are disproportionately impacted. This is a nice graphic showing all those different groups and how they're impacted. For example, people in a low-income community typically do not have air conditioning or well-weatherized houses. Or frankly, even if they have AC, the number of times I've heard people say, I don't want to turn on the AC even though it's so hot because I don't have the money to pay the bills if I do so. So these are the people that are most impacted by the climate related health effects, and frankly are also the least able to recover. After a hurricane or flooding, they're the ones whose houses are, have the mold issues or other types of problems that they simply can't fix. And their house stock is also the most vulnerable to being impacted. So that, and what we've of course seen in the last 2 years is this incredible synergy between COVID-19 and the climate crisis. And it's the centrality of the healthcare sector. It's at the epicenter of both obviously COVID and also climate change. COVID-19 also has complicated the response to climate disasters and vice versa. For instance, we need to grapple with how to safely put people, we had to grapple with how to put people in cooling centers during the heat waves last year, while also social distancing. And then we ran out of N95 masks for the firefighters in California because they were being used up by the healthcare sector, and we couldn't produce, frankly, enough of them because of the supply chain disruption. So these two crises, disasters, completely intersected and intertwined. The good news is the solutions to both, there are solutions that can help both of these crises. So those solutions, we at Healthcare Without Harm, we envision a healthcare as climate smart, an innovative sector that protects public health and climate change and accelerates that transition to a low carbon economy while improving community resilience, health equity, and access to care. Healthcare's carbon footprint is significant, as I said, and a hospital cannot simultaneously contribute to climate change and meet its mission to do no harm. That is the emphasis of our work. And the good news is we have created something called a Healthcare Climate Council. It's a group of health system leaders around the country, 18 of them. These are them, and you'll recognize many of these names probably: Kaiser Permanente, Providence, Cleveland Clinic, Mass General Brigham. Many of them are very well known, UC Health, which is part of the UC system. The council serves as our incubator. We work with them to identify and pilot solutions and create resources for healthcare sector that we can scale up. These healthcare climate council members represent 500 hospitals in 34 states, 50 million patients served annually, total operating revenue, excuse me, of 200 billion and 800,000 employees. So they have a lot of clout, and they're doing some excellent work to fight climate change. They are providing leadership. They are doing work to make their facilities, medical facilities and hospitals more resilient, and they are also reducing their carbon footprint. So where does this all lead us as far as advocacy? Well, we at Healthcare Without Harm put together a number of recommendations for the Biden-Harris administration about how they can decarbonize the healthcare sector and make it more resilient. We need to require that health facilities prepare for extreme events and enable those hospitals and health facilities to be epicenters for their communities to be more resilient. We need to provide technical assistance, or the government needs to provide technical assistance and financial support to help them be prepared and put in place plans. We need to also ensure that one of the largest medical systems out there, the VA health system, is also doing everything they can. And through Congress, we need to provide funding, tax incentives, and financing to do all of this, reduce greenhouse emissions, and become more resilient. And we've been working with Congress, and I'll get to that a little bit later. So let's dive into a bit more detail, these high-level points. HHS is a huge agency. They haven't done a lot around climate. They need to get started. So we've been working with HHS to figure out how do you put in place a plan to decarbonize and make the healthcare system around the US more resilient. For example, there's something called the Hospital Preparedness Program that HHS runs. Or they could create grants to give to tribal, territorial, safety net and rural hospitals. Those are the hospitals which have the least resources and serve often the most impacted communities, frontline communities around the country. I'll skip that since I think I'm running out of time here. So I'm sure you all heard about the IPCC report. Oh, I'm sorry. I was not changing my slides. Somebody should have jumped in.
We're okay on time. So
okay, we are okay on time. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Apologies.
We started kind of early.
A little early. Okay. Well, so we are working, as I said, we have a bunch of recommendations for the healthcare sector that we are working with the federal administration on. And as I'm sure you're all aware, we got a call to action earlier last week. The IPCC 6 Assessment Working Group 1 report came out last Monday, and it was dire. There's no good news in this report, sadly, really. The impacts from climate change are widespread and severe, and they're caused by humans. The future impacts are now, frankly, locked in, and that's because we've been delaying taking action. So certain things are going to happen. For example, the ice sheets are going to melt. There's nothing we can do at this point to prevent that from happening over the coming decades and ultimately century. Another interesting fact, methane emissions have started skyrocketing. And that's apparently from leaks from the oil and gas industry and fossil fuel industry around the world, as well as agriculture. And they've also, another key point that came out of this report is that the difference between increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius and 2 degrees Celsius is huge on the impacts. It really is worth keeping to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Every fraction of a degree makes those future impacts that much worse. So that call to action is ever that more important because we need to get started now and move quickly. There is a pathway still to hit 1.5. That's the one piece of good news coming out of this report, but it's a narrow pathway. And we really need Congress to step up and get started now. And so I was super glad to hear about your call to action that you'll be talking about later. And the good news, and we can limit to 1.5. So that's, as I said, the good news that is coming out of the report. It's just a very narrow pathway to keep it to that warming at this point. So what's going on in Congress and what are we doing specifically to help move and transform the healthcare sector? So I don't know how much you guys know about this or how much people have spoken about these details, but recently the Senate did pass a bipartisan infrastructure deal, which has now moved over to the House. Just to be clear, it's not a climate bill. It does do some good things. It does have money in there to invest in climate resiliency. It does have money in there to invest in electric charging stations and electric school buses and other things. But this isn't nearly enough for what's needed and on the scale that's needed. And so that's the message that we are carrying at this point. And that summer call to action, that's what that is all about, that you were talking about earlier. Going to your members of Congress and saying, great, bipartisan infrastructure deal passed the Senate. It's not a climate bill. We need to do so much more. You need to be working and passing the reconciliation bill. And so that's the next piece. The Senate just passed, and the reason it's important is because, again, you may have heard this, reconciliation can pass the Senate with 50 votes. Most bills cannot pass the Senate unless it has 60 votes. The bipartisan infrastructure deal got 60 votes. It was bipartisan. I forget, I think it had 69. So a bunch of, all the Democrats voted for it and a bunch of Republicans. But they will never vote for anything bigger, the Republicans, sadly, in Congress. And thus this reconciliation is the pathway forward for addressing climate change right now in the US. It includes what the clean energy standard, but it is actually has been revamped to become something called a clean electricity payment program. And the reason is that this reconciliation bill, which is part of the budget resolution, it can only spend money. It cannot do regulations. It cannot create standards. And so the clean energy standard had to be revamped to become more of a, it still has targets, but now utilities are paid to meet those targets, given incentives to meet them and penalties to not meet them. So it's all about around payments now, as opposed to a regulatory framework, which is what the CES is ultimately. You can still call for a CES. People understand, members of Congress, that this has been translated now into a clean electricity payment program. It also has a lot of clean energy and transportation incentives, something called the Civilian Climate Corps, which is basically the workforce to do all of this work. It has monies to weatherize and electrify buildings, which is incredibly critical. The size of the budget resolution reconciliation bill is $3.5 trillion. Just to give you a sense, the bipartisan infrastructure deal, new money, so money in addition to what was already being spent around infrastructure, roads and highways and ports and things, was only 550 billion. So this is, you know, multiples more. And so that's what's happening right now. This is a critical month, as I said. They are crafting, the committees in Congress are crafting the reconciliation bill. They will come back in the fall and vote on it. And we need to get this across the finish line this year. So again, that's what the Summer of Action is all about. Make sure the members of Congress get that message. Okay, so that sort of sums it up. I am here and happy to answer any questions you might have on any of this.
Thank you. Thank you for being really clear on the difference between those two and how that works. Yeah, How are we doing on questions? Does anybody have any questions they want to propose? Let's see. Mirala, do you see somebody? I can't see everybody. Do you see somebody with a question? Amy.
Amy has a question, and maybe we could stop sharing screen.
Oh, yeah. Let
Yeah.
me
Yeah,
do, okay.
that would be good. There we go. Great. Now I can see everybody. Good. Amy, go ahead, unmute yourself. Can you
Okay.
unmute me? There you go.
Thank you very much for that presentation. My question is that when I think about hospitals and medical care in the United States, what has really struck me in my personal experience is the fact that there's so much medical waste that's generated. And I personally had one of my daughters in the hospital for a very long time. And there was so much garbage that was generated every hour, of treatment. And even now under COVID, the whole idea of all of the disposable masks that have been created and the amount of trash that's been created by the masks has been a real dilemma. So what is your strategy, or do you take an approach towards the waste that's generated by the medical sector?
Yeah, that's certainly part of what Healthcare Without Harm works on. And I mean, I can share, I don't have it at my fingertips, but we put out a report around the waste that COVID has created and addressing it. So it's obviously the supply chain, the creation of all these products has a climate footprint, and that's part of the climate carbon footprint of the healthcare sector. And so just reducing the amount of materials that we use in this sector is a key piece of the puzzle. But yes, we work on reducing waste. One thing that COVID did bring forth because of the disruption in the supply chain was the reuse and recycling of products. And so people discovered that, oh, we can figure out how to clean and reuse these products and not have to just use single-use products, or devices, single-use devices, which is what they normally do for reasons of protecting health and reducing infection. And they discovered, well, we don't need to do that. We can actually have the same health comes and reuse devices by cleaning them. Unfortunately, we're starting to slide back again because the corporations, of course, want to sell single-use devices because they sell more product that way. So there's a bit of a pull and tug there. And so one of the key things is getting, for example, healthcare sector to stop using single-use devices and move more towards the reuse of materials where they can without increasing infection rates, et cetera.
Thank you. Thank you for that. You did say that 8.5% were healthcare emissions?
Healthcare sector, which includes is 8.5% of US emissions, yes.
Can you kind of break that down? Like, where's that coming from?
Most of it is the supply chain. So about 70% is the supply chain. So all the stuff that's coming and going, coming into hospitals. A smaller percentage is sort of their direct emissions. And then the other piece is like the electricity they use, or the, oil or diesel or gasoline that they use.
And I imagine a lot of the equipment is plastic, so.
Yes, that's part of the supply chain.
Right. Another question, Elliot?
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation, which was very helpful. I have a question about the science community. The IPCC report, it's dire, right? It's quite dire, and it's not news. I mean, we've known for a long time that we are entering this phase of climate change, and yet, even with the IPCC report, it comes out and there's a little bit of news during that week, and then people move on. And I don't feel like, I feel like scientists, they feel they do their research and they're not conveying the message enough to the news media, to people, and people just keep living their lives as if nothing is happening. So I'm wondering, maybe it's, I don't know if it's just me, but what kind of campaign are scientists doing to get the word out about the really drastic condition that we're facing?
Right. I mean, there's a number of excellent organizations. I mean, what you say is true about any group of people, frankly. But regardless, to focus on the scientists, and of course, you're going to have scientists who are going to stay in their lab and do their piece of research or whatever. But there's a lot of good ones out there, and there's a bunch of groups that are really, at least, that I work with, that I have worked with over the years, that are raising the alarm and trying to raise the awareness. Union of Concerned Scientists is the obvious one, but frankly, the issue-specific groups like American Geophysical Union is another really great organization. They're the ones that do all the climate work. They're scientists, huge organization of scientists. They're very good. There's the American Meteorological Society. And frankly, all American Physical Society. I mean, all the scientific societies, 10, 20 years ago, didn't have statements on climate change and didn't take action around it. And now they are much more doing so. Is it enough? No. Is anything we're doing enough? No, probably not. But I mean, I wouldn't say that scientists are not doing anything. And there are good organizations out there.
I'm married to a scientist who's on the climate, the U.S. climate, global climate assessment. And he says, well, this is nothing new. We've been, like Elliot said, we've been saying this for years. And when I challenge him on why haven't you been telling people, he says, we have. We are not policymakers. We are scientists. And I also wonder how the same thing with doctors and the AMA. They never came out about the rise in asthma or in water or air pollution. So, I've never, Elliot, I'm with you. I've never figured that out. There's got to be something in between. And that's us, I guess. That's the advocates. That's the lobbyists. Unfortunately, the lobbyists have been against us. So we have to turn that around. Mirala, you had a question. Yeah?
Hi. Your presentation was very enlightening for me personally. Last summer, I had Lyme disease. This summer, I was in the hospital with heat exhaustion. Honestly, I had never put the two together as both being effects of climate change. So thank you very much. I'm going to be talking to my members of Congress about the effects of climate change on my personal health, for one thing. But with the heat exhaustion, we've been saying for years that that heat waves were going to be one of the first, and most clearest impacts of climate change. I remember when I was working in New York City actually had a special office that they set up just to prepare for heat waves. I don't know if they still have it, but they had it at that time. I'm wondering since we lobby the federal government, what are you asking the federal government to do that's going to help people to cope with these? Obviously, they're happening all the time, these heat waves.
Right. So the Center for Disease Control, which is a division of HHS, the Health and Human Services, which is where healthcare sector resides within the federal government. I mean, they've been done a lot of the work around this, around sort of the public health impacts of climate. With respect to heat, I mean, we saw this actually happen out in Portland not too long ago when they hit 110 and emergency rooms were completely overwhelmed and unprepared. They said it was like back in the worst of the COVID times. First of all, you need to realize what's coming, and get that information out there. You also need to identify who your most vulnerable populations are and make sure that they are prepared. And so is that the fact that they have AC and can use their AC? or if they don't, make sure that they can get to cooling centers. So it's that sort of public health network that needs to be bolstered, and money needs to be put into that.
Yeah, it seems like the public health sector is, would you say that that is the in-between? They are the people that need to be vocal about the data, about the research, in between that and policy? Or is, I have their role wrong?
Oh, no, absolutely. And they are. The American Public Health Association, APHA, is very vocal in public about all of this. And we work very closely with them. So absolutely. I mean, advocacy is about educating people, I believe. And that's what we're trying to do, educating them both about the problem and then the solution.
Are there pros and cons to the payment versus regulatory tactics that have to be taken because the
Right, with respect to the clean energy standard.
Yeah. Are there downsides to the reconciliation as opposed to regulatory?
I think you need both, frankly. You need the push and the pull. In an ideal situation, you would have regulation and then also monies to help push the technologies necessary forward, or the infrastructure forward, which the regulation in and of itself would not do. But I think incentives don't necessarily aren't a sufficient stick on the polluting entities to reduce their pollution. So in an ideal world, you have both. Right now, we have one tool. And so since you couldn't have a regulatory clean energy standard, they revamped it into this other thing. Let's hope that the penalties stay in place, because that's the stick.
On that note, Chris Van Hollen wrote in the Washington Post this morning, that's our senator from Maryland, said that he's sponsoring a bill that's, I think he said it was 500 billion. That's $500 billion that the fossil fuel companies should pay to clean up their mess. So that was an interesting advance, I think, if they can get that passed.
Yeah, that I believe. One of the things with these bills where all this money is being spent is you have to find where the money is going to come from.
Right.
So it's something called, the lingo is pay for it, where is the money coming from? One of them is the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah. Any other questions? Mirla wrote, a strong public health sector is exactly what we don't have in this country. We need to add that to our advocacy on climate change. Loving your neighbor as yourself requires investment in public health. Absolutely, Mirla. Did anybody else have a question? Any of the people who aren't on video? You can unmute yourself. All right. Well, I think thank you very much, Antonia, and Antonia, and you're in DC, right?
Yes, I'm in DC, and if you want any of the follow-up, like the slides or anything like that, let me know as far as.
Okay. Yeah, we will, and we record this, so we have a lot more people who tune into that we have a YouTube channel, so
right.
So there will be more people looking at that and asking questions, hopefully.
Right. Okay. And sorry, my slide stalled. I stalled out.
Yeah. That's okay. That's okay. The talk was, your information was really strong and important. So we thank you for joining us tonight.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you for all your good work and good luck. And is it all right if I sign off at this point?
Sure. If you, yes, it's lovely to have you as our guest.
Okay.
Okay, maybe we can get together for a coffee.
Sounds good. Okay.
Right.
Take care.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
great. Bye-bye now. All right, Mirla, do you want you had some announcements and you wanted to lead us in writing some letters tonight.
Thank you, Devorah. We thought we would take some action together tonight. Okay, now let me start with a personal note. I already told you about my Lyme disease, my heat exhaustion. Another personal note. I'm feeling kind of tired right now. Who's feeling tired? Anybody? Does anyone feel like you've been repeating yourself for the last 6 or 8 months in your messages to Congress? I feel like that too, actually. And you know, it can be somewhat disheartening. Let's just say that. In our last action alert, Amy and I wrote, Judaism is a religion of repetition. Let's just think of all the things that we repeat. We don't always achieve them right away. Every year we go back and we do them again. Well, we wish Congress would move along a little more quickly. Unfortunately, they're not. So we have to keep after them. I will say, I heard something really encouraging this morning. Robert Reich was interviewed on some podcast, and he said that he really thinks that the reconciliation bill can pass, which I've been wondering about myself. But if it can really pass, we are going to see huge progress on a lot of climate measures. But it's probably going to take them another couple of months to get there. And a lot of negotiations, you know, and bargaining and everything can still go on between now and then. But we really need to keep at it, you know, chazak ve'amatz, be strong and courageous and keep going. So this month, we're focusing on the clean energy standards, which Antonia mentioned. These are the standards that will require utilities to generate electricity from renewables. Now, just think about all the things that run on electricity. Okay, let's go around. Larry, what runs on electricity in your house?
The water heater.
The water heater. Phyllis, what about you? Everybody unmute now so you won't have a delay. I'm going to call on everybody. The water heater. Yes, Phyllis.
My car.
The car, that's right, the car. We can't have electric cars that really will reduce our emissions unless we have electricity to run them on, right? Virginia, what about you? What's on electricity in your house? Or life? You muted yourself.
The television.
Yes, the television. Maury, what about you?
Lights.
Lights, exactly. Carol.
Computer.
Oh
and
gosh,
the
we
air
couldn't live without. Couldn't live
The air
without
conditioning.
the air conditioning. We can't have power outages in the era of climate change, can we? Marcia, what about you?
Everything that everyone just said. I can't think, I don't know if I have anything else that's more on electricity, but I try to be so careful and it's hard.
Yeah, but if it's running on renewable electricity, it won't be so bad. Judy, you want to say something?
My refrigerator.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Louise?
All appliances. Your
Oh,
oven, your washing machine, your microwave, your
our whole
toaster
lives.
oven.
Exactly, our whole lives. And by the way, I was just thinking about, think of all the healthcare things, you know? All the things that we depend on for our health, you know, from our electric toothbrushes to, you know, all kinds of life-saving devices. Okay, so we need this electricity to come from renewable sources. Okay, this is an essential, it's absolutely essential that the electricity sector change over to renewables. And the biggest short-term benefit of this happening is it's going to help our health. It's going to clean up the air, and it's actually going to save thousands of lives, climate change aside. And it's going to create jobs too. I just read that it's going to create 500,000 to 1 million jobs. Just this changing over the electricity sector. And it's in the budget resolution that can be passed under reconciliation. So now everybody either take out a piece of paper or open another window on your computer, and we're going to get our letters started, okay? As you're doing that, think about what's your personal story. You heard mine, right? I just realized listening to Antonia that I'm a victim of climate change health impacts, Okay? Think about what you can put in your letter, and I'm just gonna show you our sample letter. And this is gonna, one participant can share at a time. Yes, but that would be me, wouldn't it? Okay. Let's see, share, here we go. Don't forget about it. Save this, save your dates. Summer of action. Okay, renewable electricity now. You guys know all this, so we're not going to go through it, but you know, with your friends and relatives, you can tell them all these interesting things about the clean electricity standard and why it's so important. But we're going to move right to the letter, okay? Okay, Louise, are you with me?
Yep.
You have your window open to write your letter or your paper or whatever you have there?
Still doing that.
Marcia, you got your paper there, your window open? Okay, Marcia. So at the top, you're going to write subject clean electricity standard. We're going to do this real fast. Okay, you're going to put the date, today's date. I believe it's the 17th. Is that correct? The 17th. And then you're going to write, let's write our senators. Dear Senator, mine is Senator Cardin. Nice Jewish boy. Okay. We always thank our senators for something they've done. If you know something, you can put it in now. If not, you can add it later. Okay, now we have our main message, which of course you should personalize. I am appalled that the US still gets 60% of its electricity from fossil fuels. By the way, it gets 20% from renewables and 20% from nuclear, depending how you want to, you know, you want to define nuclear. So we're only getting 20% from like the really good, clean stuff. We need an ambitious federal clean electricity standard that will accelerate the transition to renewable energy. That standard should be designed to protect communities that have been most harmed by fossil fuel production and ensure that energy is affordable to everyone. By the way, if you know a community nearby that has been harmed by fossil fuel production, you could put it in there. Okay, then you can insert a talking point or a specific feature of the clean energy standard that interests you, which we have in our, we have it above here. I'll just read, see if I can go back and tell you some. Here, we have some talking points like electricity production is responsible for 25% of our greenhouse emissions. Clean energy standards already exist in about 30 states, so it's a proven policy. They're an important tool to stave off, well, however we put it there. But we just heard about the IPCC report. If we don't have clean electricity, we are not going to be able to achieve that, keeping our climate, you know, the heating of the planet to 1.5 degrees or whatever interests you. Okay. Okay, put something like that. All right, now the most important point, your personal story. So who thought of a personal story that you'd like to include in your letter while we were working on this? How about Tamar? You have a personal story you want to put in your letter?
Unmute.
She unmuted, but I think, is it, I can't hear you.
Say that now in Colorado,
Yeah,
I can feel the smoke in my eyes from the fires.
really? Because you're in Colorado.
Mm.
I saw that I think what's the fire, the big one that's in California, that it's
Dixie.
burned almost an area almost the size of Rhode Island.
The Dixie fire.
That's the Dixie fire. Yeah, great. What about Amy? What are you going to put in your letter?
I'm talking about how pollution is growing out of control because our source of electricity is more and more in demand. We're consuming more and more electricity, and that means there'll be more and more pollution unless we turn to renewable sources. How's that for drama?
Perfect. That's perfect. You can say you see it right at home with your 3 girls. I bet they use a lot of electricity.
I'm always inserting being a mom of 3 daughters and pleading on the behalf of motherhood, hoping that their hearts will melt.
I think they will. I think they will. What about you, Elliot? What are you putting in there?
Related, you know, we have all these, you know, Biden has come out with all these, all this talk about electric cars and the electric buses and everything, but it will do no good if we just release the fossil fuels from electricity. So
Right, very good. Okay, and that's in the Bronx. You have bus depots, right? Don't you have a lot of bus
we
depots?
do have a lot of electric buses. We still don't have any sort of charging station, so it's impossible for apartment dwellers to get an electric car.
Oh, well, you might want to mention that. Okay,
Phyllis is reminding us that Antonia said that we should call it the Clean Energy Payment Program.
well, either one is fine. Actually,
Okay.
she did say that either one is fine. They all know
Okay.
it was a clean energy standard, but as she explained, because of the fact that it has to go in the budget resolution, they've changed it to the clean electricity payment program. So whichever one you want is fine. Okay, now we put our Jewish message, and I just want to reinforce that these Jewish messages really do hit home. When we talk to the legislative, aides in the offices, they always tell us that our letters stand out as being different, not the usual thing that they get. So we want people to know that we're coming from a faith perspective. So you can write whatever you want, but here's the suggestion. I'll be celebrating Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and the start of the sabbatical year. I'm really into the sabbatical year. That is commanded in the Bible. The Bible teaches that if we don't give the land a rest from agriculture, we will not survive. Today, the land needs a rest from the exploitation of fossil fuels. That was my message, but you can put whatever you want. It is the new year, so maybe what you're thinking about in terms of repenting or whatever means something to you. Who has a nice message they're going to put, a Jewish thought they're going to put in there that they'd like to share?
I was going to say that during the pandemic, I really felt the less is more, that life had a lot of meaning because we weren't distracted by sacred shopping and all sorts of distractions that we have. So doing less was more.
Beautiful. Ziv, what about you? What are you going to put in your letter?
I'm actually, since you mentioned the bus depots, I'm going to talk about that. I have a housing project right a few streets away from me, and I was calling into. There's like a New York City Housing Authority push that's been going on too, also around climate, because not only do people not have access to lots of different technological things, but the conditions are horrible in lots of ways. But there's no insulation. People can't keep their homes regulated in any way. And I think there is still a city body that works on cooling zones. I don't remember what it's called, but I've been seeing lots of advertisements for it.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Okay. Would anyone like to read us their letter? I know I kind of rushed you through this, so you might not be ready, but would anyone like to read their letter?
Or at least part of it.
Yeah. Let's see. How about Maury? Would you like to read us part of your letter?
I don't have it done.
I'm too busy.
No, I'm too busy listening to you. I always do my letters. I will do them after the meeting or in the next few days.
Okay, very nice. And then I just want to point out, we didn't mention that Ziv is the one that gets all your letters, and he organizes them and arranges them beautifully with the cover sheet and sends them to the offices. So we want to thank you, Ziv, for that.
Yes. Yeah.
And for a little extra inspiration, are you feeling a little more inspired and empowered now? A little bit?
All of us, or Ziv?
Oh,
me especially. And so I'll speak for everybody else and say I'm much more empowered.
Oh, okay.
Mira, you did a wonderful job.
Okay, fine. Now I want to show you something to inspire you. On Sunday, it was the Chazon Jewish Food Festival in Detroit. And we had a wonderful volunteer, Rabbi Moshe Giventhal, who volunteered to staff our table at the food festival. And as you can see, here he is at the table. And we decided to focus on climate solutions in agriculture because it was the food festival. And what he did, along with a few other volunteers from Detroit, is organized a photo petition. So it was believe it or not, it was a drive-through festival because of COVID. 240 cars were planned to drive through the festival. And at most of the stops, they received some kind of food. But at our table, they participated in this photo petition. So I brought you some of the best photos from the photo petition. Isn't that adorable?
Yes.
Okay. Here's some more. And just to show you what we're going to do with it, we're going to be sending all these photos to the Michigan senators to show them how many people are concerned about climate change and want them to take action. Isn't that cool?
Did you give them the colored paper too?
No, actually, I sent them the signs and they mounted them on newspaper. Wasn't that clever?
Yeah, very clever.
Stop sharing.
Yeah,
That's right, Marilyn.
it was great.
So I'll now turn it back over to Devorah to close us out for the evening.
Okay, thanks. You know, if you celebrate Shabbat in the traditional Orthodox way, you reduce your carbon footprint by about 18% if you don't make it up in the rest of the week. By stopping on Shabbat.
Only if you keep lights
reduce-
off and you don't burn them for 24 hours.
Well,
and keep the
that
oven on for 24 hours.
You're absolutely right. or the oven on and that kind of thing. You're
By the way, I mean,
absolutely.
I just wanted, I'm sharing, you know, I went, my Shabbos observance 20 years ago was the kind of Shabbos observance that would have lights and ovens on. And I actually felt that it was more responsible Shabbos observance to actually not do that,
Right.
but with great intention. And that was one of many important decisions, even, you know, even with the hand washing, not to fill up the cup. I mean, really to just conserve. And that felt like exactly what God would want from Shabbat. And I just want to say, Maury, while you're at, I wrote to you privately, but I'd love for you to help me write the letters, because I think we're writing to the same people, and that would be helpful to me, and then we'll send them.
Yeah.
So we could get on the phone together.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. I texted. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, Maury and Judy are running a Southern California consortium with lots of different congregations. Are you at a congregation in OC?
I'm actually one of their partners. I have.
Oh, you are? Oh, great.
I have an organization that is looking to invigorate environmental justice activity Jewishly in my community, and working with anybody I can find to bring that together. So hopefully by the end of the year, there will be a bigger group of us.
Great. That sounds terrific. What's the name of the organization?
It's called the Jewish Collaborative of Orange County. That's
Got
what
it.
you were seeing when you saw my little logo.
Yes, right. So as always, I want to bless all of the activists here tonight and all those that you represent, that tzedek tirdof, that you continue to pursue justice, that this is very holy work. And we're in the month of Elul, the first week of it or second week of it, and it's a really introspective month preparing us for the high holidays. And I heard one rabbi say that the shofar is the voice of our soul. That when we hear the shofar blown, we are hearing the cry of our soul, really. And so I can practice my shofar blowing. I'm going to blow a little shofar for you to wake you up. And then hopefully you'll have a good night's sleep on top of that.
Thank you. Can I just share with you guys something that we're doing on September 4th, even though we'll be on Pacific time. You know, my organization hosts, Maury comes almost every week, a Saturday night program in conjunction with Havdalah that has many different components to it. But the one we're doing on September 4th is Al Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha,
for the sin of gas and oil proliferation. And I'm having a wonderful young man who I'd love to speak at one of these meetings named Nathan Taff, who works for Stand.Earth. And I'm looking to actually put together, I'd like to have 1 or 2 other people to come and be part of that. It'll be at probably 7 p.m., maybe 6:30. We're moving it earlier as Havdalah gets earlier. We'll do it. And I'm wondering, you know, I had asked Mirala, but she said it was past her bedtime. So Judy, I wrote to you. I don't know if you got my email, but I was hoping you'd be part of that panel with Nathan. And if there's anybody, I mean, you know, if Mirala, if you can think of anybody, if you can, I'd like to sort of put together something that's like that Maury would feel comfortable having JJA say, go listen to this. It's worth, you know, listening to, or something like that. That's this event. So
Send me the information.
okay.
dlynn1951 at Gmail.
Okay.
dlynn LYNN
Okay.
1951, and send me the information, because I sometimes stay up until 11 o'clock. Okay. And that would be great. That would be great.
Thank you.
Well, blessings to everyone. Thanks for staying a little extra this time, and we'll see you again soon. Oh, should I say, Mirala, that I think we have decided not to have next month's meeting because just about every Tuesday is a holiday. But there is going to be a Sukkot action, and we'll let you know about that. And the September 30th is your program on line 3. So there'll be a lot going on for climate during the month, and we'll keep you posted on that. And so then we'll have this meeting back in October on its regularly scheduled time. All right. Thank you all so much. Great to see you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Oh, I didn't thank my steering people, Amy. Oop, I missed her. All right, it's okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.